Hi, my name is Jan Pinkava. I'm a creative director of Google Spotlight Stories, and I'm happy to be here at the View conference in Turin, Italy.
When it comes to VR, much like traditional film, can you talk about the global nature of talent?
Talent. Well, the VR has very different ways of delivering itself. There are different ways of getting to the audience. And so the audience is global for sure, and that means that anyone who can make good content in VR is going to find a global audience, and that's going to mean that global talent can find an audience wherever they happen to be.
Which is why we have VR studios literally all over the world.
That's right. So because mobile VR is a way of getting to people on their phones as well as dedicated headsets and tethered headsets and 6 degrees of freedom and so on, there are, for the different formats, there are ways of getting to an enormous audience potentially. And I know VR is at the top end of VR, 6DoF full VR as we might call it, is still new and still finding its way, still spreading its wings, and it's still looking for that larger audience. But there's a whole spectrum that the audience can be from across the whole range of possibilities in VR.
Can you talk a little about how your background from traditional storytelling is helping as you deal with virtual reality storytelling?
Well, I come to virtual reality with the bias that stories are here to stay. And one way or another, if VR is a serious format for entertainment, there ought to be a way that we can tell structured stories in the traditional way in VR. And that's what we're trying to do at Google Spotlight Stories, develop tools and techniques to be able to structure the experience, because story is structure, and that's the way we can communicate with an audience. So the whole game, as far as I can see, is about finding ways in which we can gain and keep the attention of the audience, much as we do in the movies, but also in the live theater. And I think VR, actually, from a narrative perspective, is perhaps like movies reaching out to live theater, and somewhere in the middle is VR, because it's real-time, recorded, but interactive showbiz.
And specifically, maybe more like theater in the round.
Yes, it's in a way theater in the round, inside out. So we're inside the world of the story and looking around, and it's up to me, the storyteller, or whoever that storyteller is, to not only guide me so I know where to look, but also deal with wherever I happen to be looking and whatever I happen to be hearing. So the language is different. The language of film partially applies to VR, but there's new techniques that we need to learn to be able to tell a coherent story to the audience and give the audience a good experience. It's our job to make the show a good one. So we're trying to figure that out.
And traditionally, they say any movie is 50% music, right? 50% sound. What role does sound play as you're exploring VR, especially with trying to direct eyeballs within a virtual world?
Yeah, I think sound probably has even a bigger role in VR than it does in cinema, because it's a fantastic modality that you can't turn off, and it's a great way to communicate to you inside the world of the story what's going on. Just as reality tells you where to look when a dog barks over your shoulder, and you look, so it's a great way to direct the attention of the audience in space, in the space of the virtual world they're in, and in interactive, flexible narrative, like of the kind of stuff we're doing at Google Spotlight Stories. The challenge is to make music have a flexibility that can have a cinematic scope and a cinematic scoring, but be able to flex with the attention of the audience. That's an actually really interesting area.
For many, many decades, we've had video game creators have some of the same dilemmas of trying to steer people through a virtual world. Are there elements from that medium, art form, that are helping with what Google is doing in VR storytelling?
Absolutely, yes. I think we've got a sort of meeting space between cinema and theater and games and mobile technologies, a whole bunch of different disciplines that come together to do the kind of VR that we're doing. And all those lessons of game development about how to deal with real-time attention is that's all relevant to what we do.
Can you talk a little about the experiments? Because not only are you guys experimenting, but everyone else is out there. Boabab's here at View, and all these other studios are out there experimenting. How are you guys learning along the way in what really is a brand new art form?
The way we try and keep it real is to actually make good shows. We have ideas about the tools and the techniques that we can develop, but none of us really know if they're real until we've made an actual production that has actual demands. And so it's a great learning experience to work with a talented director who has a story to tell, to help them navigate through this weird world of VR and to solve the problems that they need to solve to tell the story they want to tell. And in that, they're learning how to use this new medium, we're learning how to help them, and the solutions we come up with become relevant and serious and real because the rubber hits the road when we're actually trying to make a show that people care about.
When it comes to VR, a lot of the early experiments have been very short, but at the same time, when you're in a VR world, time kind of slows down. What are you guys learning in terms of the length of time that's currently good for telling a story in VR?
Well, I happen to be a fan of short films generally, and so far it seems that it's a great discipline to figure out storytelling in the short form. Certainly VR lends itself to that. A lot of people are wanting to do longer format work, maybe half hour or more. I've yet to see that really working very well, but maybe that'll come. For now, there's plenty of room to play in short form work, and there's a lot of problems to solve so that we can make it not only a tolerable experience, but a good experience to be wearing a VR headset for a feature-length movie or a length of time. I think it makes sense to take it in bite sizes and to be making and publishing shows that are short film length right now.
Can you talk a little about your latest short and what you guys have learned from that?
So we're just about to release a short called Age of Sail, directed by John Cars, who's an Academy Award-winning film director, won an Academy Award for Paperman, his short at Disney, and an old friend of ours from Pixar days. It's a drama. It's 12 minutes long. It's a redemption story about an old man who has been left behind by the steam age, and he's a sailboat captain. And he feels that the world has left him behind, and then into his life literally drops this young girl who falls off a passing steamship and changes everything for him. John, for him, this is a very personal story. The styling of it is beautiful and like being inside a moving painting. And we're very proud of the way it looks and feels. We hope audiences like it. It's definitely one of the most ambitious projects that we've ever done. And it's certainly a very, it's ambitious both technically and dramatically. So it's exactly the sort of thing that we should be doing, stretching.
What role does replay ability play in VR versus traditional short or traditional film?
That's a great question. I think it's a very different thing to gaming, where the whole idea is to be continuously involved and in upping levels and being in the flow of a skill development. I think you're still in the same area as cinema, where there's a story to tell, and it's interesting to experience the same story in different styles and forms, but I think it's less of a question of multiple repeats, although, depends on your age. When you're a little kid, you want to watch the same thing again and again and again. I know I did when I was young. So that may have something to do with it.
Well, also within VR, I know, for example, location-based VR, there's companies like The Void that are specifically putting in Easter eggs for people to get maybe on the second or third time through. Is that type of thinking already in shorts?
Absolutely, yeah. It's one of the things where if you're putting people inside a world and you're not going to move you're not going to force them to pay attention to one thing or another, then you've got to cope with the idea that maybe they want to look elsewhere than you want them to look. And so one of the things that's always a good idea is to put something of interest everywhere, but to still have this idea of which threads through the possible set of stories that you could be telling you actually want to encourage the audience to see. Because our goal is still to tell a story to the audience and not to leave the audience to make up their own story, because that's work. We should do the work so that we present something that's appealing and an exciting experience. And so usually the Easter eggs and the other forms of candy that you leave around are there to maybe make it richer and more interesting, but we do try and concentrate on a narrative thread in all its variety and all its possible versions in a non-linear VR space.
And what excites you when you look to the future of VR storytelling?
I think we're just beginning this idea of what you might call passive interactivity. That is, the audience doesn't have to do anything. It's not a controller-based game-like thing, but it's just experiencing. But the environment and the experience itself changes depending on that particular audience at that particular time to actually be relevant to them. Just like you and I sitting in the real world talking to each other, we interact. So we have the potential for storytellers to use this new technology to interact with their audience in real time when that audience is watching their show. That's a fascinating idea. And the stuff that we're doing right now is just baby steps compared to what we could be doing in terms of reacting to the audience's attention in telling a story.
Well, and reacting also, we're seeing more and more advances in eye tracking technology, which will be able to have a huge impact on that.
Maybe, yeah. All these sort of things which are about the conjuring trick of putting on a show. The attention of the audience is what you're really managing or dealing with when you're putting on a show that's interactive. So I want to know, are you with me? Are you paying attention? Do you care about what I'm saying? Are you following the action? Is this story point that I'm making really having an impact? All these things we're now able to start talking about having more of a sure idea of. And because we don't have a screen to watch, we can't tell the audience all the action is over here. We have to bring back a lot of that old theatrical stagecraft that is weirdly coming back and intersecting with this brand new technology. That I find fascinating too. So I actually love the fact that it's old and new are coming together really, really very strongly, and we're having to just craft things that work.